This is the story of how a war fought more than 6,000 miles from American soil pushed the national debt past $39 trillion in a matter of weeks. If you're somewhere between 55 and 65, watching your pension, your 401k, and your bond holdings, this is the story you need to understand right now. Let's start with the number that should make every retiree in this country sit up straight. On the 17th of March, 2026, the gross national debt of the United States crossed $39 trillion for the first time in history. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, 5 months earlier, on the 21st of October, 2025, that same debt had only just crossed $38 trillion, which means roughly $1 trillion piled on in 150 days, broken down by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation. That comes out to $289,000 per household, or $114,000 for every single American, including your grandchildren. The engine driving that explosion sits on the other side of the planet. Here is what actually unfolded. Back on the 13th of June, 2025, Israel launched what it called Operation Rising Lion against Iranian nuclear facilities, and 8 days later, on the 21st of June, the United States struck 3 nuclear sites inside Iran: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. A ceasefire followed, and most Americans assumed the story had ended there, but it hadn't. On the 28th of February, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a second round of surprise attacks on Iran, and this time no ceasefire arrived. The Council on Foreign Relations and Wikipedia both confirm active hostilities have continued since that February morning, and that is when the bill started landing on the American taxpayer's doorstep. The Pentagon will tell you the war is cheap. Acting Pentagon Comptroller Jay Hurst told the House Armed Services Committee on the 29th of April 2026 that the war had cost roughly $25 billion, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth backed him up on that number. The problem is that the Pentagon itself had already admitted to Congress back in March that the first 6 days alone burned through $11.3 billion. Quietly, the Trump administration then submitted a request to Congress for a $200 billion supplemental to keep the war funded, which leaves any honest observer wondering which figure actually reflects reality. Linda Bilmes, the Harvard Kennedy School economist, who correctly predicted in 2006 that the Iraq War would cost trillions when the Bush administration was insisting $50 billion would cover it, has run her numbers on this one as well. Her estimate lands at $1 trillion by the time the dust settles. Speaking to Al Jazeera, Bilmes put it plainly: wars always cost more than expected throughout history. Those who get into wars tend to be optimistic about the cost and about the length of time it will take. She added, "I am certain we will reach $1 trillion for the Iran war." Congressman Ro Khanna delivered the same message even more directly when he questioned Hegseth in that committee hearing. Khanna told the defense secretary, "You don't know what we paid in terms of the missiles. You don't know what we're paying in terms of gas. You don't know what we're paying in terms of food. Your $25 billion number is totally off." His own estimate for the broader economic damage came in at $631 billion, which works out to roughly $5,000 draining out of every American household. And that is only the war itself. The bigger storm is the budget that is coming. The Trump administration has formally requested a $1.5 trillion defense budget for fiscal year 2027, representing a 42 to 44% increase. And according to Al Jazeera, and the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. That would mark the largest expansion in military spending since World War II. Now let me explain why this lands inside your retirement account, not just on the federal balance sheet. The whole story comes down to a single piece of water called the Strait of Hormuz. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, roughly 20% of the world's petroleum liquids, about 20 million barrels every single day, flow through that strait. Iran sits directly on it, and when the war broke out, those tankers stopped moving freely. Brent crude oil spiked to $120 a barrel at the peak. According to Al Jazeera reporting, by May 22, 2026, the average American gas price had reached $4.55 a gallon, marking the highest level in nearly 4 years per CNBC. Axios then reported that every one of the 50 states had average gas prices above $4, with 7 states pushing above $5. California's own governor's office calculated that prices were 44% higher than the day the war began. And Time magazine measured American families paying about 80 cents more every time they pulled up to a pump. Higher fuel costs hit everything else in sequence. Groceries climb, airline tickets climb, heating bills climb, and Qantas told Time directly that they were raising fares specifically because of jet fuel costs. For retirees living on fixed incomes, fixed pensions, fixed Social Security checks, fixed annuity payments, that wave of inflation quietly eats your purchasing power every single day. Here is the part that should genuinely worry anyone holding U.S. Treasury bonds inside a retirement portfolio. In a normal global crisis, money rushes into U.S. Treasuries because they're supposed to be the safe harbor of last resort, and that is not what happened this time. Charles Schwab's research desk noted that, contrary to typical safe haven behavior, 10-year Treasury yields rose sharply after the attacks on Iran, driven by inflation expectations. Reuters reported by May 2026 that global bond yields had hit multi-decade highs, with the 10-year Treasury yield climbing back to roughly 4.4%. Rising yields drag bond prices down, and if you're holding a bond fund inside your IRA, you've already felt that bruise. The picture darkens from there. On May 16, 2025, before the second phase of the war had even ignited, Moody's ratings cut the United States from its top AAA credit rating down to AA1, making it the last of the 3 major agencies to strip the U.S. of its perfect score. Worth absorbing that this downgrade happened before the debt hit $39 trillion, before the war supplemental was filed, and before the $1.5 trillion defense budget request landed on Capitol Hill. Let's stitch the full picture together. The Congressional Budget Office reported a federal deficit of $1.8 trillion in fiscal year 2025, with $1.9 trillion projected for fiscal 2026. In 2025 alone, the United States paid $970 billion purely on interest, according to the Peterson Foundation, and the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget projects interest payments will total $13.8 trillion across the next decade. Fortune calculates the debt is growing by roughly $5 billion a day, while the Joint Economic Committee pegs the year-over-year pace closer to $8 billion daily. The tariff plan that was supposed to dig America out of this mess collapsed in February 2026 when the Supreme Court ruled most of Trump's tariffs unlawful. $3 trillion in debt reduction through 2035, which is what the CBO had projected those tariffs would deliver, evaporated with that ruling, and Trump himself called the decision deeply disappointing. Senator Elizabeth Warren walked out of a closed-door briefing on the war and told reporters, "It is so much worse than you thought." Trump has not given a single clear reason for the war and has no plan to end it. Here is where all of this lands inside your life. By 2036, the CBO projects federal debt will climb to 120% of GDP, marking the highest sustained level in American history. And when a country's debt outruns its economy, the policy options narrow to three painful choices. Taxes go up, spending gets cut, which historically translates into pressure on Social Security and Medicare, or inflation quietly erodes the value of every dollar parked in your savings account. None of those three roads end well for somebody living on a fixed pension. This is exactly why a war 6,300 miles away, the actual flight distance from Washington to Tehran, ends up mattering at your kitchen table. Oil pushed to 120 a barrel because of it. Gas climbed past $4.50 because of it. Treasury yields jumped and bond prices sank because of it. A $200 billion war supplemental and a $1.5 trillion defense budget got triggered because of it, and the national debt cleared $39 trillion in a matter of weeks because of it. The Pentagon insists the war cost $25 billion, while Harvard insists the real number is $1 trillion, and history tells us Harvard is usually right. The fighting is happening over there. The bill is getting paid right here, whether you're already retired or 5 years out from collecting that first pension check. The math on your retirement just got a lot harder. Thanks for watching. If this helped you understand what is really happening to your retirement dollar, hit subscribe, because the next 12 months of this story will matter more to your pension than almost anything else moving through Washington right now.